Today on Delving Deeper, we are going to be discussing the difference between creating TTRPG experiences for introverts versus extroverts. And the reason why I originally wanted to do this, Alex, I don't think I had mentioned it to you, but since we have kind of a team building exercise when it comes to tabletop gaming, of people sitting around and trying to craft a story, a lot of players that have maybe different personalities and different comfort levels when it comes to performing in a lot of ways, and their personal ability to interact with others. If you're a GM and you're trying to include everyone in that conversation, it can be a little bit tricky, I think, to try and make sure that you're tailoring that quest to everybody that's involved. I don't know your experiences of who you've played with before, but I'm guessing that not everybody was equally inclined to do the role-playing experience in the same way.
Yeah, no, I feel like unless you are playing with like a group of professional role players, people that are like the Critical Role type team, where it's like, hey, we're kind of like voice actors and
Yep.
famous-ish people who are doing this because we auditioned and screened for it. Feel unless you're doing something like that, everyone's gonna be slightly different on their level of involvement, whether they're okay with doing crazy voices for their characters, or if they just want to kind of speak as themselves. And I feel like it's okay to do have differences for your players and the GM yourself, whether you want to do those voices, act
Sure.
as a character, just kind of like, all right, well, I want to do this, or even if you want to be like, my character is going to do this, I don't see any problem with that.
Yeah.
But there's definitely a difference in how people play their characters in their RPGs.
Yeah. Especially if you're into acting. Before I get a bunch of really nasty comments in the thing, we're aware that Critical Role was not an audition process.
I'm not aware of that.
Okay, sorry. Alex was not aware of that. You don't know how Critical Role started?
I don't want to.
Okay, fine. Anyway.
No, there are other role-playing,
there are others,
like,
yes.
podcasts and whatnot, and it's like, yes, audition for this part.
Yes. Well, yes, one that I happen to be the GM of, that is what happened for the cast and crew, and even me. We auditioned for that. So that does happen a lot more with RPGs. Sometimes it's just some outgrowth of home game, which is the story behind Critical Role. But the thing about it is, though, that they were all friends and they kind of knew each other in many ways because they were voice actors. They worked in that same community. Chances are the people that you're going to be talking to and a lot of people that you game with are not necessarily that, and might not really even want to be out there with their characters, do character voices, anything like that. The thing that I find to be the balance here is when you're GMing. We'll start with the GM perspective here because it is critical. It's a critical role you have to play. Anyway, it is a critical part that you have to play, and trying to figure out how you keep people who are kind of introverted by their very nature, don't really want to be in the spotlight, make sure that they are part of that adventure, part of that quest, that their characters are still doing something, and that they have time to shine, even if they're not necessarily volunteering that. And people who are very extroverted and are Timmy wants to get up on the table and do a song, those sort of folks can maybe just hold off for a minute and let some other people, be involved in the process too. I know that they're like a lot of times when I'm playing, at least, I will not really talk unless I'm specifically my character is specifically in the frame. Like, if everybody else is doing something, I usually don't say anything at all. I'll usually be very much in the distance until I realize, oh, my character has to do something. And then it's like, great, I'm in Spotlight now, so now we're going full on, and this is the time where my character has to contribute something. If you're new to gaming, though, you probably don't know these things, and how that interaction works, and how that group, storytelling experience works. So, if you're the GM, you have a lot of fresh-faced new players. Some of them are like, I want to go storm the castle, and I'm going to be drinking beer the whole time, and I'm going to ride a dragon into the castle. And you have some people that are in the back kind of like going, okay, what do my stat sheets do? What am I supposed to do? I have strength, I have dexterity. Can I sit in a corner? Can I sit in a corner and wait for something to happen? How do you bring an experience out to kind of like include people who are introverted? Let's start there.
Oh, are you asking me how I do that?
Yeah.
Or are you
I'm pausing for dramatic effect.
pausing for dramatic effect?
I'm pausing for dramatic effect.
Well, I think part of that too comes from your, session 0 if you have one, where it's what people expect and what you expect of your players.
Sure.
That'll help too. So it's like if you want to ride a dragon into the castle, that's fine. You're probably not going to do that right away. That's fine, but we can set those expectations. And one of those things that you can do is get people on the same page.
Gotcha.
So you get your players who want to be out there and going crazy, and the players who are kind of maybe a little bit more shy or just a bit more quiet to be more involved. You find things that they as players and as characters want to do and want to experience in game.
Right. The other thing that I would just be aware of is when you kind of like talk to your players during that session 0, or even before, when you're kind of saying, hey, I want to get a thing together, is to take stock of the kind of characters that they want to play, what their personalities are, and ask them questions too about their characters, about what to flesh that out a little bit. I think some more introverted players will probably just be like, I think this is my name and this is my character sheet, and won't necessarily know that they can flesh that out, or realize that there might be an expectation to flesh out your character a little bit more and talk about it more.
And of course, we don't necessarily mean flesh out your character with a 20-page backstory.
No. But a little bit more than here's my name and here's my character sheet.
I think D&D 5e has a good example of this, where it's got the flaws, bonds, ideals, and whatnot for your character. Those help really kind of flesh out some of the just basic ideas of what your character is and who they are.
Yeah.
And things they've got going on, or people they might know, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of games do a better job than they used to with that stuff, where it's, all right, well, give us a little bit more information about you and decide on this stuff. And even when I played with like David, it was, all right, well, give me a little bit of like your background. We can flesh out a little bit of that so we have something to pull from.
Right. The background system that they have in 5e is really good for that too, because it's one mechanically inclined. You actually do get some mechanics and benefits depending on the background that you pick, but it also does inform your character. So kind of a little bit about where you came from, so you have a history there. Yeah. And those are really nice. Helps just kind of customize your character a little bit more than you normally would. And I think encouraging those things and really having your players engage with those systems, especially if they're, new and maybe a little shy, that will help out a little bit to try and bring them up to speed. But also, once you actually get into those sessions, is being aware of who's doing a lot of things and who's really in the background. And if they're in the background a lot, maybe asking them what their character is doing in those moments where you have a pause. You've had your characters that are right out there that wanted to ride that dragon into the castle, burn everything into the ground. They've had their moments where their characters did something, but before they go on and they're like, now we're storming the castle. Whoa, okay. what about if we check in with a couple of your other teammates here, because they I don't know what they're doing right now, and we want to make sure that I know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And because it's so easy for for you to have characters that basically just get towed along with Ravid Back Scratcher, and the orc dwarf that wants to storm all the castles and burn, and that it's basically that guy and the rest of the party. And it's real easy to keep to make it so that everybody else falls to the background when that one character kind of hogs spotlight.
Well, I think one of the other things you can do there as well, even if one player, say, or a couple of the players take the forefront on charging that castle, as we're using this example, apparently, liberally. If they want to burn down the castle, it's fine, but maybe there's somebody in the castle that knows that party member who's not talking a lot, that either they need to interact with or is begging for them to save them, or maybe that's an enemy, something from that character's backgrounds, perhaps. That gives that character a reason to interact with the events going on.
Okay, yep, no, that's a good point. That's a good point to make. Yeah, and it's not necessarily that you couldn't have a character that just doesn't say very much, but I do want to check in with them and see what they are doing, and if they, because they might have something to contribute, but they just didn't want to say anything. And I want to make sure that they're included in these things before we move on to the next whatever. One of the things I do, and this is terrible advice from a role-playing standpoint or narrative, but sometimes you might have moments where you break up the party. You always know how fun that is.
Split the party time.
Yeah, it's split the party time. But there is a case that you could make. I had one of these things that happened in a town, and I basically had told my folks, like, well, before we go to the adventure, really, you have a little bit of time in this town, and everyone's kind of free to go and do their own thing. You can go as groups if you want, but you can go off into your own corners, and I'll tell you some of the stuff that's there. And what that allowed was for each one of the characters to kind of go off on their own a little bit and have interactions with some of the characters that were in town and pick up some story threads on their own accord. And I liked that only because it gave them a moment where they know that it's just about them interacting with the world, and kind of helps me get a little bit more information about what they have, and maybe even start some story threads there, which I never really got to complete, but the point is I was trying. But to make sure that was the case. Now, in my particular case, I didn't have any real introverts in my crew, because we had actors, comedians, and filmmakers and artists, so it really wasn't a problem there. But if I did have people that were a little bit unsure of what they wanted to do with their character, that just gives them one moment where they don't have to think other people are going to be talking over them at all, because they're on their own. Now, as a tactical thing, it's a terrible idea. You don't want to split the party as a tactical move. Everybody knows that. But from a storytelling standpoint, sometimes it's very good for the individual character development. Now, the extrovert part, sometimes reining that back in. I know you really wanted to ride in on that dragon and storm that castle. I know you really want to do that. But before you go on and do that thing, we're gonna just see what everybody else is doing. I know that that's hard for a lot of performers, especially when you kind of get on a roll. But from a GM's perspective, I think that it's important to make sure that nobody hogs the spotlight forever. You don't, you know, it's fine if you want to go off for a while. I can entertain that if you want to do this for a long period, but not forever.
Well, that's where you kind of go, well, this person is doing that.
Yeah. Okay.
While this is going on.
Mm-hmm.
what are you guys doing?
Right. Because maybe they're going off on their own. This is also the thing. It's like, okay, so we're riding in on the dragon, drinking some beer, berserking the tower, all of that good stuff. Are all of you going to do that with him, or are we doing something else?
And that's another way you can ask as well.
Yeah, because if you guys just want to go with it, all right, that's fine. Anything you want to contribute at this point, go ahead. We'll roll with it. But if we're doing something different, I'd like to know now, and just like to know who is, and I've played with different GMs that do this, is everybody going there? When somebody says, this is the next place I want to go, and it's like, okay, is everybody going there with them? Or are we going somewhere else? Anybody else doing something different, going someplace else? Very important to note. Also very helpful for storytelling, because then you know where everybody is when we start new scenes.
Very good to know.
Yeah, you kind of want to, because you don't want that surprise where all of a sudden, like, you're like, oh, we're starting combat, only to realize, oh, 2 of my characters didn't join.
Oh, they're at the library? When did that happen?
Oops. Really would have... Oh, gee, I really should have known. Or I didn't think you guys were coming. Oh, no, we were carrying the beer for the beer zerker.
I didn't know you split the party.
We didn't know. Oops. We did a split the party. Uh-oh. Can't have that. So from a GM's perspective, I think that's helpful, just to try and keep your extroverts and your introverts both engaged without overwhelming anybody or sidelining anyone. But player perspective. Okay, let's say that you are a bit reclusive.
Sure. Like a spider.
We're hermits in real life.
Like a snail.
Yeah. And in fact, we took the hermit background when we made our character. We even did that. Yeah, absolutely. Tips. Ideas on how you can be more actively engaged in your role playing. Things that you might ask the GM. Thoughts on like how you can kind of like be more engaged if you want to be, or better yet, if you really aren't that kind of a player, how you keep from being in the spotlight at any time.
I mean, you can always act instead of speak as well.
Sure.
You don't necessarily have to be talking the entire time. You can be like my character, or I want to do this thing.
Sure.
And do this action as well. You don't have to just be like, oh, I'm gonna have a speech now. You can act.
Right.
You can do a thing instead. If this was a crit think section of the show, we could always pass that question along to our lovely Discord friends. Family. I was gonna say family, and I was like, wait, no, they're friends. Are they a family? Is it a Discord family?
Right.
But, you know, there's a lot of different ways, and I know some of the people in our Discord have some great thoughts on that as well.
Sure.
Or maybe some people that aren't listening, that aren't in the Discord, would like to jump in on that as well. I'd like to see what other people have to say that aren't us on that point.
Sure.
Because I think some of them have a lot better ideas than you or I might have.
Yeah. No, it's true. I would say the piece of advice that I might have given for that is you could tailor your character to actually be kind of quiet. If you wanted to build your character at the very beginning, knowing that you did not want to necessarily say too much, you could just say, like, well, maybe he doesn't speak. Or, like...
he's mute.
He's mute. Or a person of very few words. We could say it that way.
Sure, but then you still need to do things as well. You can't just be like, I want to sit in the back the entire time and kind of just be dragged along.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, those characters don't really work very well in a role-playing game, I'm sorry to tell you. You can be that if you want, but it's not. I don't think you especially are going to enjoy that if
Yeah.
that's the character you're playing. You're going to be watching everybody else do an adventure, and you're going to be like a voyeuristically watching the whole thing happen unfold in front, and I'll be like, oh yeah, no, totally, I'll pull up my sword. Glad I could contribute, and then go back.
Playing that lone wolf who follows everyone.
Yeah. And then for extroverts, the piece of advice I usually give to people if you're extroverted and you're in a role-playing experience is understand that the spotlight can't not always be on you, and you occasionally have to pass that on. So something that I am very fond of doing is there's a lot of times where the crew is going to be talking about what they might want to do next. Those are usually times where I try not to jump in too much, because I don't want to then make a cacophony of sound. There are times where I realize that my character has a spotlight on them, and therefore I am going to be doing some cool stuff. I'm going to be making some shit happen. But after that, though, there is a period where I'm realizing, well, my character's really not going to be involved with this next interaction, and this is stuff other characters are going to be doing. So this is a good time for me to just step back and let that happen, because everybody else deserves a chance to be involved in this. It can't just be it can't just be the Nathan show, you know?
No. It can be the Nathan show when you are running the game.
Exactly. But even then, I don't really want it to be the Nathan show, because then it's not a game. It's just a person on a power fantasy, right? And we don't really need that. It's tricky. I've played with a lot of people. Some of them are very, very shy, and some of them can be very much performers. And I think people kind of get the hang of it after they've played a few times, but if you're really new to it, it can be kind of daunting to know, like, what exactly am I supposed to do? What is the expectations here for me in a role-playing setting like this? Because everybody can kind of get down the mechanics of a role-playing system at some point, but the actual storytelling aspect is more esoteric. It's a little bit less tangible in those ways, not locked down, and so those are hard to kind of like explain to people when you have a lot of different personalities at the table, which is required for role-playing games. So, but do you tend to? My question to you at the end, though, is do you find yourself being more of the extroverted character when you're playing, or more of an introverted character?
That's tough, as I haven't really played a game in several years, and the last one I did was me and one other player, so we both kind of bounced off each other really well.
Got it.
And most of the time, we were doing scenes together.
Oh, sure.
So I think it really depends on my party.
Sure.
I don't think I'm super extroverted though when it comes to that type of thing. I don't think I'm gung-ho like as far as you would be, when you're like, all right, you need to reel it back a little bit. Because you are very, very boisterous at times with that.
My characters are a lot.
Yeah, your characters are a lot. I don't think I'm quite that forward with my characters, as though.
No.
My last character was a lot more of a quiet type of character, more so that Phaestus was more of he was druid, so he didn't know his way around social situations at all very well, and he was getting all his social cues from the half-orc he was with. So he was very not normal either for that. And so it was more he was a socially awkward character.
Yeah.
But in that he didn't quite understand.
Yeah.
So that was less of him being so forward, but more of him being not sure of how things worked, which was fun.
Yeah. Okay.
So that was fun to do that, because it wasn't so much I'm going to be at the forefront of these social situations and these things going on. It was more of he's going to be unsure and aloof to some of these situations and kind of just like, wait, this is how things work? Very curious about things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. No, Snowball, Rembrandt, Dr. McFly, they're a lot.
yes.
They're a lot to take in, I'm not gonna lie. But see, that's the thing, is that I don't necessarily want to derail the story, but I definitely come in planning on injecting a certain energy
Yeah.
into that is probably not going to be as serious or as focused as a lot of the players would be. Just the way I play. One day, I did have a thought, though, Alex. Tell me if you like this idea. Is that I did have a thought one time, just to do something completely different, but it's also, I thought it was hilarious. I wanted to play just like an average, in every single way, human fighter whose name was Jean Narek. No personality, monotone, just talks like this the whole time. People ask,
Hello, Governor.
yep, right down here.
Like this the whole time?
Yep. And then, my occupation is I hit things with a sword. Yep, that's all I do. and I kind of like the idea of being completely opposite, but I also thought that's kind of hilarious.
A little.
For me.
But then you just dump everything into strength and just hit things like a truck.
Oh, yeah. But see, also...
He does one thing, but he does it really well.
Yeah, but I kind of... His personality, though, is that he's also, in many ways, because of the fact that he's so generic as a character, he's also a little bit oblivious to the world around him. So, I always thought that it would be one of those things where if they said, yeah, roll for initiative, I'd have to be like, okay, I'm gonna roll for initiative, but I'm probably gonna, if you'll let me, I'm rolling it with disadvantage, because Jean's just staring at the brickwork right now. He's really not paying attention. He's not actively engaged right now. I will gladly take disadvantage on my initiative roll.
I feel like there should be a trait for aloof.
There should be an aloof trait. Hey, let's make it happen. Come on, Wizards, you're trying to build like a new D&D system. Aloof should be in there somewhere.
I feel like there's some ways you could get negatives to initiative.
Oh,
or
I'm
perception.
sure. Oh, I'm
His
sure.
wisdom is negative.
Oh yeah, wisdom is negative. Yeah, they got to do more with the negative traits and stuff.
Well, I mean, different conversation, but not a lot of people necessarily like taking negatives on their characters.
It's true. I've seen some systems too where they'll do that, but it's so that they can get advantages in other realms.
Yeah.
Where it's like, yeah, you could take a lot of negatives so that you're really bad at a lot of stuff, except that there's this one thing that is so OP you can do now that it's absolutely
3.5
insane.
Had some systems like that.
Yeah.
But that's a discussion for a different day.
That is a very different delving deeper. But for this one, I think we've pretty much wrapped that up. And hopefully the conversation will continue over on our Discord channel. So we're waiting to hear from you.
Patiently.
Yeah.